There is a presence in the room with you. You feel it when you wake up, a heaviness in your chest that sleep did not cure. You feel it when you stand in the aisle of the grocery store, staring at a price tag that defies the logic of your memory, and you feel a sharp, involuntary flinch in your stomach. You feel it when you open your banking app on payday, that fleeting moment of dopamine, only to watch the numbers evaporate within hours, siphoned off by rents and debts and premiums, leaving you exactly where you started. There is a suffocating quiet that has settled over your life. It is a sensation you cannot name because the world refuses to give you the vocabulary for it. You certainly won't find it on the news. If you turn on the screen, the faces are smiling. They point to green arrows. They speak of resilient consumers and record-breaking markets. They tell you the economy is robust. They tell you that statistically you should be happy. And yet, when the screen goes dark and you are left with your own reflection, the reality is cold. You are working harder than your parents did. This is not a complaint, it is a calculation. You are more educated, you are more productive. You hold degrees that cost you a mortgage's worth of debt, tickets you were told to buy for a future that was promised to you. You followed the instructions, you optimized your resume, you took the side hustle, you skipped the vacation. You did everything right. On paper, you are a success. You might be earning $80,000, perhaps $100,000. Numbers that a generation ago meant safety. Numbers that meant you had escaped. But when you lie in bed staring at the ceiling, you don't feel safe. You feel hunted. You feel like you are running on a machine that is controlled by an invisible hand. You run faster. You sweat more. You sacrifice your sleep and your sanity. Yet the scenery never changes. The finish line, that place of rest, of ownership, of exhale, is drifting further away from you, matching your speed exactly. You ask yourself questions you are too ashamed to whisper. Why am I making 6 figures, but I'm terrified of a single car repair? Why does my high salary feel like an allowance? Why am I drowning in a sea of abundance? If you try to speak this, society gaslights you. The older generation tells you that you are soft. They point to your smartphone, your streaming subscriptions, your air conditioning. They say, look at your toys. You aren't poor, you are ungrateful. So you go quiet. You assume the defect is in you. You assume you are bad with money. You assume you just aren't working hard enough. But I am here to tell you something different. You are not crazy. You are not lazy. And you are not alone.
The suffocation you feel is not a personal failure. It is a structural design. We are living through a historical event that has been carefully camouflaged. There are no breadlines. There are no dust bowls. The banks are not boarding up their windows. This crisis is silent. It is invisible. It is hidden behind high-definition screens and easy credit. It is quietly harvesting your future, your dignity, and your hope, all while you scroll through your feed. Welcome to the silent depression. But be warned, giving it a name doesn't make it safer. In fact, understanding why it's silent might be more disturbing than the depression itself.
To understand why this depression is silent, we must first deconstruct your image of what a depression looks like. When we speak of the Great Depression, you think of 1929, you think of starvation, you think of physical lack, you think of men willing to work for pennies just to eat. That was a loud depression. It was a crisis of scarcity. The shelves were empty. The factories were quiet. The pain was external, visible, and shared. If you were poor in 1930, the world validated your reality. The depression you are living in today is different. It is a crisis of affordability masquerading as prosperity. It does not attack your stomach, it attacks your autonomy. It does not starve you of calories, it starves you of a timeline. The disappearing milestones. To name this pain accurately, we must look at the contract of the American life. We must look at the milestones that defined adulthood for 70 years and acknowledge that for you, they have not just moved, they have evaporated. Consider the timeline of 1990. By age 22, you graduated. Debt was manageable, a nuisance, not a life sentence. By age 25, you were independent. You had your own space. You were not a child in an adult's body. By age 30, you bought a home. It wasn't a mansion, it was a fixed cost. It was a fortress against inflation. Now, look at your timeline. The entry fee for adulthood has become insurmountable. 25 is the new 18. 35 is the new 25. You are told this is a cultural shift. You are told you value experiences over things. But is that true, or is that a narrative you've adopted to cope with the fact that the things are no longer for sale? Consider home ownership. For your parents, a home was shelter. For you, it is a speculative asset class that hedge funds are fighting you for. The median age of a first-time homebuyer has hit an all-time high. But this isn't just about real estate. It is about psychological safety. Ownership means your landlord cannot evict you. It means your housing cost is fixed while your wages, theoretically, rise. It means you belong to a community. When you erase ownership, you create a generation of permanent guests. You are a tourist in your own life, always passing through, always paying a premium for the privilege of existing. Consider the one-income household. There was a time when a single income, often a blue-collar income, could support a family.
A mechanic, a teacher, a mail carrier. They could buy a house, have a car, and save. Today, the dual-income household is mandatory. You and your partner are both working 50 hours a week, both educated, both exhausted. And yet, you are one medical emergency away from insolvency. You are doing twice the labor for half the stability. The luxury of a stay-at-home parent is now reserved for the ultra-wealthy or the desperate. Consider retirement. For the previous generation, there was a pension, a promise. Give us your best years and we will secure your end. For you, there is a 401k that fluctuates with the mood of the market. You look at the math and you realize the truth. You will work until you are 70, maybe 75. The concept of golden years is a fairy tale from a book you cannot read. You aren't working toward a finish line, you are working to service the machine. This is the core of the silent depression, the transition from a society of owners to a society of renters. You are renting your lifestyle. You don't own your home, you pay a landlord. You don't own your car, you finance it. You don't own your music, you subscribe to it. You don't even own your mind, you rent it to your employer for wages that buy less every year. You are living in a subscription model existence. You are merely a conduit for money to pass through, from your employer to your bank account and immediately out to the asset-holding class. Why does no one call this a depression? Because the economists use broken rulers. They measure GDP. GDP measures activity. If your rent doubles, GDP goes up. If you divorce because of financial stress and need 2 apartments, GDP goes up. If you get sick from exhaustion and spend thousands on healthcare, GDP goes up. They are measuring the velocity of your struggle and calling it growth. They are measuring how fast the treadmill spins, ignoring that it is grinding your bones to dust. This is an existential depression. But here's the disturbing part. If this were simply about hard work and affordability, it wouldn't feel this precise.
and it wouldn't feel this personal.
The question follows: if the contract is broken, if the game is rigged, why are the streets empty? Why are there no riots? Why do you wake up, drink your coffee, and commute to the job that isn't saving you? The answer is not economic. It is biological. The system is not just manipulating your wallet, it is manipulating your neurology. It is exploiting specific glitches in the human brain that blind you to the reality of your own decline. These are the mechanisms that keep the silent depression silent. 1. The money illusion. Your brain is a biological machine evolved for the savannah, not for the Federal Reserve. It has a flaw. It sees nominal value, not real value. Nominal is the number on the screen. Real is what that number buys. Imagine your boss gives you a 3% raise. Biologically, your brain releases dopamine. You feel rewarded. You feel valued. You text your partner, "I got a raise." You celebrate. But if inflation is 7%, mathematically, you didn't get a raise. You took a 4% pay cut. You are poorer today than you were yesterday. If your boss said, "I am cutting your salary by 4%, you would riot, you would quit. Your fight or flight response would trigger. But because the number got slightly bigger, even as the price of survival got much higher, your brain interprets it as a win. You are being sedated by the illusion of progress. You look at your bank account and see numbers that would have stunned your parents. $100,000. It sounds like a fortune, but in the silent depression, $100,000 is the new $50,000. It is a survival wage. You are running a race where the mile markers are being moved while you run. But because your speedometer says you're going fast, you think you're winning. At this point, most people think they understand the problem. Inflation, prices, bad luck. That explanation feels satisfying, which is exactly why it's incomplete. 2. Shifting baseline syndrome. This is the most insidious mechanism. Human beings have a terrifying ability to forget the past and accept the present as normal. Each generation resets the baseline of acceptable suffering. A child born today looks at the world and sees $7 coffees as normal. They see paying $2,500 for a studio apartment as normal. They see hustle culture, working a full-time job and driving Uber on the weekends, as normal. They do not have the memory of the time before. They do not remember that one income used to buy a house. They do not remember that college could be paid for with a summer job. Because the decline happens slowly, year by year, we adjust. We are the frog. If you throw a frog in boiling water, it jumps. But if you turn up the heat by 1 degree every year, the frog sits. It adjusts its body temperature. It normalizes the heat. It boils to death without ever realizing it was in danger. We are normalizing a level of insecurity that would have sparked a revolution 50 years ago. We just call it modern life. 3. The culture of optimization. But there is a layer deeper than normalization. There is the way we internalize the blame. We live in the culture of optimization. When the system breaks, Americans are taught to fix themselves. We are obsessed with self-improvement, not because we are ambitious, but because we are terrified. We feel the water rising, and instead of building a boat, we are trying to learn how to tread water more efficiently.
Think about the content you consume. The 5 a.m. club, the ice baths, The productivity hacks. Why are these popular? Because they offer a seductive lie. If you are struggling, it is because you are not optimized. If you can't afford a house, it's not because prices outpaced wages by 400%. It's because you bought a latte. It's because you didn't budget. It's because you slept until 7 a.m. instead of waking up at 4 to dropship products. We treat exhaustion as a badge of honor. We treat burnout as a personal failing. You feel guilty when you rest. You feel guilty when you watch a movie. You feel guilty when you aren't monetizing your hobbies. Self-improvement has become the anesthesia for a dying middle class. It keeps you busy. It keeps you focused on your flaws so you never look up and see the flaws in the game. And if you're honest with yourself, you don't optimize because you love growth. You optimize because deep down, you're afraid of what happens if you stop. 4. Hedonic adaptation. Finally, the ultimate survival mechanism. Adaptation. When reality becomes too painful to change, the brain changes its expectations. We rebrand poverty as a choice. Can't afford a home? Call it the tiny house movement and praise minimalism. Can't afford a car? Call it the sharing economy and praise flexibility. Can't afford children? Call it the child-free lifestyle and talk about freedom. I am not saying these are bad choices, but ask yourself, are you choosing this lifestyle because you want it or because it is the only option left? Hedonic adaptation is the brain's way of protecting you from despair. It lowers your expectations until they match your reality. It allows you to look at a life of permanent renting, permanent debt, and permanent instability and say, "This is fine." But here's the problem with saying, "This is fine." If your brain is programmed to adapt to anything, how much more can be taken from you before you notice?
So, here we are. You are trapped in a room with a ghost. You are earning more money than ever, but your life feels smaller. You are more productive than any generation in history, but you own less of the world you are building. This brings us to the heaviest realization. The reason there is no revolution, the reason the streets are quiet, it is shame. In a loud depression, when everyone is starving, misery loves company. There is solidarity in suffering. You don't blame yourself, you blame the bank, the drought, the system. But in a silent depression, the struggle is private. Because you have a job and a phone and nice clothes, you feel like you should be okay. So when you aren't, you hide it. You don't tell your friends you are maxing out credit cards for groceries. You don't tell your parents you have zero savings. You post the vacation photo, but you don't post the debt it caused. We are suffering in isolation. We are drowning in silence, each convinced we are the only failure in a world of success. That isolation is the prison. And here's what should bother you. Systems don't rely on force when shame works better, which raises a much darker question. Who benefits from keeping you ashamed? If this is a depression, if the standard of living is collapsing, if the math doesn't work, why do the numbers look so good? Why is the stock market breaking records? Why is GDP flying high? Who is this economy actually for? If you are getting poorer, someone else is getting richer. If your purchasing power is evaporating, it isn't disappearing, it is being transferred. There is a mechanism behind this. There are policies, timelines, and data points that explain exactly how the wealth of the middle class was siphoned off, drop by drop, right in front of your eyes. I don't want you to just feel this depression. I want you to see the machinery. I want to show you the numbers they don't put on the news. I want to show you the moment the game was rigged. In part 2, we turn on the lights. We will look at the data. And I warn you, what you are about to see will not be comforting. It will make you angry. But anger is better than the fog. Because once you see the numbers, you can never go back to believing this system was broken by accident. I'm the wise clay bull, and we are just getting started.